Great. Yeah, we've got a lot on the agenda today, so we'll go ahead and get started. So we will call to order the meeting of the Private Forest Accord Mitigation Advisory Committee meeting today, Tuesday, September 30th. Begin with roll call. Andy, if you could please lead us through a roll call.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call your name. Please respond in the affirmative if you're present. Chad Washington.
Here.
Joe Joe, I'm so sorry. Lovesite. Please correct me.
Levesite.
Levesite. I have it right here, but I'm mechanically spelled.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, Joe. Scott Lightcap. Scott will be joining in late today. We'll grab him after. Courtney Greisel.
It's Greasel, and I'm here. You're just having a day. We're going to make it harder.
I know. Sorry, I'm just adding that shorthand. Thank you for the patience. Fran Cafarata, Andrew Perky.
I'm here. You got that
Stern.
one right.
Mark Stern.
Here.
Mark Granbremer. Kate Thompson in place for Jennifer Weichel.
Here.
Thanks for taking the time. Kate Wells or Sam?
Hi, Andy. Yeah, Sam Bankson here sitting in for Kate Wells.
Thank you, Sam. Sarah Gregory.
I'm here.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to hand it back to you, Chad.
Great, thanks. I believe the committee received the agenda a while back. Has everybody had a chance to see that? And if so, I will ask that we approve the agenda unless there's any comments or edits. Hearing none, we'll consider that approved. Our next item is the consent agenda, which consists of just the meeting minutes from our July meeting. Have folks have time to review those? See a couple heads nodding. Any comments, corrections? All right. Seeing none, I think we can consider that approved as well, Andy. Which brings us to public comment.
All right.
You did distribute the written public comment. We all received that.
Yes, we got public comment written that was distributed to the committee ahead of time. At this point, it's an opportunity for members online to provide additional public comment. You'll get 3 minutes for your comment. So if you do have any, please raise your hand virtually and come off camera and we'll call on you. All righty. Mark Hudson, we've got you. Feel free to start. Once you start going, I will start the timer. We don't have the audio for you, Mark. It seemed to have cut out right when you started speaking.
How about now?
Sounds good. All right, we'll restart that timer.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I hope you're having a good morning. Mark Hudson, I'm the Conservation Director at Pacific Forest Trust, 1801 Northeast Purcell Bend, Oregon, in terms of where I'm coming from. Just wanted to say first, thanks for all the hard work on the manual. I know how much work it is to put these things together, and as a first-time effort, it's even more difficult. So we do appreciate it. And I talked with Andy a little bit yesterday. It sounds like our worst concern regarding the exception of nonprofits from eligibility for the land acquisition program was probably an error. It sounds like Andy's working on it one way or another. So thank you, Andy, for that. We do have some other comments, first of which kind of comes to the central purpose of this program. It is obviously a land acquisition program, a conservation easement acquisition program. I think in my reading of it, it does seem that there's some intent to be able to include restoration and land management activities, which would be beneficial in that. I would, however, say that it's kind of unclear how that integrates or how the restoration and management activities may be ascertained or, let's say, ranked or considered or what have you for the committee, by the committee. And this is hard. And I think, there's a lot of work that we do in developing projects that even before they come before the committee, before we put the application materials together. And so I think one thing that might be beneficial is a little bit of a clearer vision of what is the ideal project. What does that look like? Obviously we have to benefit covered species, but what would you guys like to see, and with a little bit more clarity in the distinguishment between the acquisition and the restoration management? Other comments: appraisal. We do not recommend to pay more than the appraisal, though. However, if staff wants to talk with us, there are flexibilities in the analysis which can happen in appraisal, which might benefit the program, and we'd love to talk more. Payment of past due taxes, as mentioned in the written comments, we do have some difficulties with that in terms of the expenditure of public funds. Public access requirements on private lands, because this is a conservation easement program, to our mind creates some pretty significant barriers to being able to implement. And this being really about benefiting covered species, requiring those things which would be potentially significant barriers does seem to be pretty detrimental to the program. So we would recommend excluding a public access requirement, though obviously if you want to give more points to a property in the scoring or consideration to a property that includes that, and a scoring and ranking criteria, we do think that that would be good. There's a lot in terms of the eligible costs and application questions. It's really a lot to kind of get into in a short period of time.
All right, Mark, if you want to wrap up, your 3 minutes is just about over.
Yeah, and so that being said, we do, on those kind of detailed questions that can really make a better application, we do ask the committee to direct staff to spend a few hours with those of us in the land trust community as to how we can kind of maybe do a red line and an iterative back and forth to get a really excellent manual out of it. So we are willing to provide that time and hope you guys can too. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. Appreciate that comment. We have another hand raised. Carson, you'll have 3 minutes. Feel free to unmute and start your public comment.
Thanks, Andy, and good afternoon, all. Chair Washington, Vice Chair Stern, and members of the committee. Thank you for the time today to provide some comment on the land and water transaction manuals for this grant program. My name is Carson Kendrick. I'm the Conservation Director for the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. We have 32 members that work across Oregon to protect and restore lands for the benefit of people, wildlife, and clean water. Collectively, they have protected over 780,000 acres of land in our state, keeping working lands working while also protecting natural resources values. So we're really excited to see the build out of this program under the guidance of ODFW staff in this committee. I also want to thank staff for the quick engagement around eligible entities for the transactions and letting us know that nonprofits are in fact eligible and that previous exclusion in the manual was an error. Just really appreciate that partnership. Mark submitted some more robust comments around other aspects of the manual that you just heard a little bit about, and I wanted to just come on today and offer any support from our community in building out this portion of the grant program. Conservation easements and acquisitions are the bread and butter, how land trusts do transactions in partnership with private landowners and other organizations. And we work really closely with agencies like OWEB and their acquisitions program. So we're happy to continue to engage as this manual is developed. And if there is any interest or potential for some type of workshop opportunity to talk about more complex aspects like public access, project match, appraisals, we would be happy to help in any way. So just wanted to echo that and thank you all again for the time today.
All right, thank you for that. If you have any other public comments or requests for it, now's the opportunity to raise your hand. Your virtual hand. All right, Chad, I'm going to hand it back to you. It doesn't look like we have any additional requests for public comment.
Great. Thanks, Andy. We will now get into the acquisition guidance documents. And a couple points to clarify before we do that. One is that the materials that were posted online were provided to the committee at the same time that they were posted online. That is to say that the committee has not had our fingerprints on any of the work to date. It has been solely prepared by the department as a basis for a proposal and will be under review and we'll make recommendations. It'll be an iterative process. It is not likely that we're going to have something ready to go for this solicitation, given that we're hoping to get that out in October. That isn't to say that it can't happen, but it is important as a committee that we do it right, however long that takes, rather than hurrying to do it wrong. So whatever input we need to receive, we will solicit. I did hear a couple things around acquisitions and want to clarify that we are solely talking about conservation easements, not fee acquisition, except for the case of the water rights, that is acquisitions in total, right? Is that correct, Andy? As prepared?
I'm sorry, I was typing no for your previous comment.
No worries. I was just saying that I've heard a couple times acquisitions in regards to the land trust communities and wanted to clarify that we are solely talking about conservation easements.
Sure.
And the only acquisitions that we are discussing are water rights acquisitions. Is that correct?
Yes, conservation easements, water rights.
Excellent. So for anyone listening online, I just wanted to clarify that the committee has not had review and input into what you have before you. We are going to be reviewing it now, soliciting feedback. We'll have to run things through DOJ. There'll be an iterative process. So as things come up, please continue to provide that valuable, public comment that helps direct how we go about our business. So with that, we can get into the acquisition guidance documents. Any other comments from the committee before we do so? Mark Stern, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say I appreciate the comments from Mark Hudson and Carson Kendrick. I think the land trust community has a lot of experience with easements. And so obviously it's a long and lengthy document. Andy, you did an amazing job of pulling this together. There's a lot of minutia involved in these sorts of propositions, if you will, and as well as with the water transaction. So I'm just sort of putting it out there. I think we ought to allow an opportunity for some of the partners that are experienced in this to make sure they have an opportunity to provide, either meet with you, Andy, in person for a couple hours or whatever it is, or provide a red line version. But I think they can help us see where maybe there's some points that could be refined or clarified. I think everybody's leaning in the same direction, but I think, this kind of document really benefits from having multiple eyes and input on it from not only the committee, but also from our partners out there.
Yeah, well said, Mark. I'm sure many lessons have been learned, and we don't necessarily need to learn them the hard way if we can just solicit feedback. Okay, well, with that, it sounds like we are going to start with the water rights acquisitions in order to honor Andrew Perky's time. And Andrew, it sounds like you might have to leave a little bit early. Is that the case?
Yeah, I've got to leave at 1 p.m. I apologize for that.
We'll get through what we can with the water rights piece first.
Chad, I had actually planned to just do my short presentation on both land and water rights, and then we can lead with water rights then. Is that okay? Or would you like me just to discuss water rights first?
Yeah, we can go through that first, Andy. I'm just trying to be cognizant of Andrew Perky's time and know that he has a lot to offer that water transaction component.
Yeah, I think I'll share screen here, and I don't think I'll be more than 5 or 10 minutes in my just overview of both guidance documents provided by the department, and then kind of just open it up. I just want to help set the stage for these documents also. Give me just a quick second here. Just pulling up my notes here. Chad, are you able to see what's on screen here?
Yeah.
Thank you. Alrighty. Oh my gosh. I think I need like a
We've got the overview, if that's what you're intending
or
to
screen here. No, my stuff's just moving all over. I'm trying to be able to see you guys. I'm gonna reshare though, so you don't see your guys' reflections. There we go. Okay. All right. Yep. I'm just gonna start briefly with this overview and then get right into it. So good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is Andy Swerk. I'm the Private Forest Accord Grant Coordinator. Today, I plan to very briefly overview each of the draft guidance documents for land and water transaction projects, both of which, if finalized, as Chad noted earlier, we'll try our best to include in future solicitations. These new funding pathways will be competing with each other and other project types in this as this grant program allows. Those being planning grants, implementation, and research and monitoring grants that we also offer for funding. Following my brief review today, I hope to enter into discussion with the committee on possible revision to these draft guidance documents, which are not final at this point in time. So I do encourage discussion. It should be noted that as of this presentation, we have yet to go through a legal sufficiency review. We've done some preliminary stuff, but once the committee comes up with some final documentations, we'll enter that stage and try to make it as concurrent as possible and hopefully wrap it up thereafter. In addition, just so everyone knows who's online today, as you see on screen, the referenced attachments that we'll be talking about today are 4 of them. They can be found at pfagrants.com under the advisory committee meeting page. So I encourage you to please navigate over there as we review these documents. All right, so I'll briefly provide an overview of the new land transaction funding pathway, followed by the water transaction pathway under the grant program before we move into the committee discussion. So please know, as I said, these are just draft documents. That means that there's room for refinement and better alignment with the program goals. We've worked to capture the committee's discussion over the past 2 years, although we know not every detail made it into this draft. I encourage the committee to share feedback so we can strengthen this guidance document together. I'll do my best to answer any questions throughout the meeting and will be sure to follow up with any that I cannot answer today. That said, right off the bat, I'd like to elaborate briefly that for land transactions, nonprofits are eligible entities for a land transaction. It was accidentally left off on the eligible entity list under conservation easements. It's been updated in the draft guidance documents moving forward. Appreciate the patience and understanding. So, land transaction, eligible project types. Land transactions under this pathway are limited to, as Chad said, conservation easements only. These must occur in non-forested land and cannot be used for any mitigation-related purposes. That means no projects that fulfill regulatory obligations or permit requirements. The legal interest in the land must be held by one of our eligible entities that are listed in the draft guidance documents. Some key requirements, again, this is very high level touch points that I'm doing. The new funding pathway comes with a few set of requirements specific to land transactions, and here are just a few of the higher priority requirements. Applicants must submit a full due diligence materials and complete management plan at the time of the application. A certified appraisal or third-party appraisal review are required to support just compensation and grant reimbursement. The properties generally need to be accessible to the public and have legal access, and that was discussed at previous committee meetings. There is a 25% match requirement, which can be met through cash, in-kind, or partner contributions. The conservation easements must offer protection aligned with the Habitat Conservation Plan and benefit the covered species. We're working to establish new review processes with land transactions to assist with scoring and technical reviews as we enter that phase in the future. And lastly, escrow and advance payment options are available to reduce the financial burden on applicants during the closing period. So that's all I wanted to discuss for land transactions. Like I said, those are just some key requirements that we put in for this draft guidance document. It is open up for discussion with the committee when we enter there. So water transactions, this is designed to support projects that restore, protect in-stream flow to benefit Habitat Conservation Plan covered species. Water transaction projects fall under several categories, most of which involve legally securing water to remain in-stream for ecological benefit. This includes in-stream flow restoration projects such as full season and split season in-stream leases, permanent or time-limited in-stream leases. Other eligible agreements include forbearance agreements, where a water user voluntarily agrees to not divert water during critical periods, minimum flow agreements that guarantee baseline ecological flow, and other water use agreements, which will be evaluated case by case. Some key requirements that we've included in this draft guidance document include, like land transactions, these projects must entirely voluntary and must provide meaningful benefits for species covered by the Habitat Conservation Plan. There is no match requirement for water transactions, making this more accessible to a wide range of applicants. However, cost justification is still, of course, required. While traditional appraisals are encouraged, applicants can use a market-based comparison or third-party expert opinion to demonstrate fair value for water transactions. We are currently working to incorporate new technical reviewers, of course, with this water transaction pathway to help evaluate proposals and assist with scoring. We do have some of our water experts online today to also help with answering some questions as we get there. Escrow and advanced payment options are also available for water transactions as well, which are especially important for covering costs prior to project closing. Like I said, that's very brief. That's all I got for those. So Chad, I'm just going to hand it back to you. I just wanted to some 30,000 foot touch points there.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Andy, could you go ahead and pull up the water transaction manual and share that screen so that we can discuss as a group?
Yep, just 1 second here. I'll get into that. Let me get into track changes as we might make edits. All right, Chad, it should be coming in here.
Yeah, looks good. And I see Andrew has his hand up, so
Yeah.
Andrew, we'll go to you.
Great. Chad, before we deep dive, could we ask Spencer just to provide a real high level description, and Andy as well, as to the basis for these two documents, what informed their creation, what they took from to support them? And I'd say from the outset to both of them, great job on this, really well done. So just some context setting at a high level, please.
I will
Absolutely.
take. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to hand it right over to Spencer.
I was going to do the same to you, Andy. I think you deserve the credit for developing these documents. Bobby and I weighed in on some of the specifics based on experience actually conducting these types of projects, but Andy really laid the foundation for the bulk of the guidance document. So Andy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
And more specifically then, Spencer, Andy, did you reference OWEB's process and OWEB's forms? Because I haven't had a chance to circle back to them to do a eye check comparison.
So and that's acceptable. Just to kind of preface both guidance documents is we've referenced our partner state agencies on what they have done, and we've worked to adapt those into this program. So there'll be a lot of spots, especially grantees that are on this call that are looking at this or that will be looking at it. There's going to be a lot of similar language in certain aspects of it. Other times we pull back because we have different priorities as a grant program, right? We're within ODFW, of course, different priorities. The PFA is different. But yes, both of these documents are heavily influenced by current, status quo practices when it comes to these type of efforts.
Thank you.
Courtney.
Yeah, can you kind of in the same theme also talk a little bit about how these manuals relate to the broader grant program?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
And that grant program's kind of core outcome mission?
Yeah, so these are appendices of the primary grant program. So our larger grant program, which is going to be our primary solicitation, which is discussed at our next committee meeting or thereafter, however we find that out or find that path. Essentially, this grant program currently funds restoration activities for the most part. Let that be implementation, research monitoring, planning. But with legislative intent, we are actively seeking to incorporate water and land transactions, as you've seen on screen here. And so these are just ultimately closing that full kind of loop with finishing up our legislative intent of this grant program to meet that. Hopefully that answered the question. The rules, there's going to be a lot of repeat info in these appendices from the primary solicitation. That's because they are part of the primary solicitation. There's just enhanced guidance in these documents. So what is written in the primary solicitation with the primary grant program, that is the umbrella. That's still, those guidances and practices still take lead, if that makes sense, or the hierarchy still exists in the grant program for these. these sub efforts.
So it's to say that these manuals are not creating separate acquisition grants as much as they are adding tools eligible for use within the base grant. We're expanding the tools.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair classification of that.
Mhm. Okay. And so, Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a clarifying question, and it pertains, I think, both to the water transactions and the conservation easements. You know, sometimes there's sort of the cost of just acquiring the water right or of acquiring the easement, but then in some instances, there'd be additional restoration work or management work, whether it's putting up a fence or maybe repositioning a pump or irrigation station or a ditch or something. Do we see that the financial aspect of sort of purchasing the water right or the conservation easement, is that separate and distinct and only for this part of the program? Or how does an applicant who's going to have some associated restoration address that? Is it sort of wrapped into one proposal here, or is it one proposal under this swimming lane and then another proposal under the restoration part of the PFA grant?
Scott, do you mind if I respond to that? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Andy.
Okay. So yeah, great question, Mark. Thank you. And forgive me for kind of giving some not broad strokes, but talking in terms of both programs here, or both acquisitions types. So yes, short answer is they can apply as one shebang here if they want to. There's reasons for that. I know that can be difficult sometimes. You want to partition that out. So for like water transactions, if they're doing, they're setting some water aside, for example, we're giving them the opportunity, or there's an irrigation efficiency project that they have. Also, we need to give them the opportunity to pay for that supplies, implement that irrigation efficiency effort. So in short, yes, they can. Same thing with conservation easements. There's supply budgets. So if they are going to obtain a piece of land under an easement, they can apply for restoration activities within that same grant. And what that means is they can say there's a conservation easement they're proposing on the edge of a riverbank somewhere. I'm just making up something completely. And they want to do some restorative actions that meet this grant program's intent. They can either A, do two different applications, right? Or B, they can do one application for acquisition and restoration for it. So the opportunity does exist there. Spencer, I didn't know if
It
you want to
seems like
speak more.
it's kind of up to the applicant, right, Andy? Whether they want to separate those out or whether they want to just have the one application to include both.
Yes, exactly. It'll be up to the applicant. And as we do encourage with most applicants to reach out to their regional biologists, PFA stream bio, to have those discussions, what's more competitive, and it's helpful. Though I was going to see, Spencer, if there's anything on like water that I missed for like irrigation upgrades and the importance of being able to have like a supply budget with those water purchases.
I don't think so. I think in general, a big portion of the grant application budget for an efficiency project is going to be infrastructure, so that'll be incorporated there. I guess I'm thinking more of if you get a really willing landowner who's interested both in water management change and some physical habitat restoration work, you could combine the two into a larger grant. That's what comes to mind for me.
Thank you, Spencer.
That's helpful. And then that'll be just the applicant's decision whether they're going to try to package it all into one large grant and hope that that is successfully funded, or if they're going to do it more piecemeal and see if they, I don't know, benefits to both, but that's a permit applicant decision. Courtney, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think just in these themes, as I reviewed, I was struggling to see how we would make decisions on potential uplift in the absence of framing of the mitigation work. That acquisition in and of itself is not necessarily uplift. And so I guess that was a lens I used throughout all of these as we move through it, and I know we'll get into them, but this discussion feels relevant because I'm trying to understand if we are all thinking about that relationship and where this action fits into the overall goals the same.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, Courtney. I think that's well stated, and that is the core of what we're here to do, is provide that uplift and the lens that we should all be looking through. But the water rights in particular, I think there can pretty clearly be a demonstration that returning in-stream flow, if that is determined to be a limiting factor, can provide that uplift to the covered species as long as the covered species are present and that the flow is decided to be the limiting factor. I saw Andrew had his hand up. Scott's got his hand up.
You just said what I was going to ask for clarification, so thank you.
Okay, and then things do get a little different with the conservation easement. So a conservation easement in and of itself isn't necessarily going to provide the benefit. It is the terms that are included in that conservation easement that will either provide benefit or not. So we'll have to look at what the provisions are on a case-by-case basis, but there will be some eligibility requirements that help filter those that clearly aren't going to provide the benefit we're looking for. And Scott, you had your hand up?
You know, I was just going to lend support to what Courtney mentioned. I had the same struggle as I was going through this, trying to, future how I would weigh a conservation easement project against a culvert removal. One is an instantaneous benefit. The other, okay, could be decades away, depending on, follow-up work that needs to be done. So I just going forward, that's one that I think we'll have to talk more about and figure out how we compare those apples to the other oranges and make it all make sense. So that was it.
Yeah, that's right, Scott. And there will be, some work to be done there. We'll also have to look at efficiency of public money. I mean, these are dollars that Oregonians have given to this program through their taxes, and we need to make sure that we're providing as much uplift as we can for the dollars spent. And the timber industry is also funding some of this. But the point is, if we've got, X units of conservation value through uplift for X dollars, we want to try to get as much uplift per dollar as we can. So it'll be competitive, that's for sure. Sarah, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just hoping that Andy could speak a little bit more about it looked like there was going to be separate review teams focusing on these acquisitions. Is that what I saw on the slides? And wonder if you could speak a little bit more to how those might function relative to the overall advisory committee.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. So I'll answer the question kind of by taking just a little step back just so I can paint the picture real quick of what the review process currently looks like. So right now we have 5 review teams across the region. Each region review team has about 4 to 5 members on it. So that's one PFA Stream Bio who leads it. They come to Salem every year and they work with us to do project selection. We have ODF on there. We have the services on there, 2 services on there, Fish and Wildlife Service, NOAA and NIMS. And then we have OWEB on there also. So we get about 20 reviewers across the state, 25 reviewers across the state. How I envision this process to be going for at least for land and water transactions is that we are going to be, as we get these applications in, we'll be kind of cherry picking those applications out to an extent. It will still be weighed against the regular criteria in this grant program, the scoring matrix that everyone has access to online. But they will be reviewed by specific personnel that are experts in water or land. And that will then be relayed to the PFA stream biologist to carry that review. So the stream biologists, as they give presentations to the committee every year, they actually have the ability to tap experts within the department for their review. So they have an internal review form that if, for example, we have like Region 3 doing a water review, which would be somewhere on the coast, they would be able then to tap one of our water experts we're lining up, and they would do a review on their behalf, and the stream bio would communicate it back to the committee in that sense. That's how I envision it, at least depending on timelines and how we get moving forward with this stuff. Just because there is kind of, as we get into these more siloed types of projects, there's not that many experts out there. It's a little bit harder to find them. There's plenty of experts out there, but it just gets harder to find them. So that's my thought initially. Hopefully that answers the question, and happy to answer any other questions that may have caused.
Andrew?
Yeah, Andy and Spencer, when you looked at the OWEB process, and I know there hasn't been a ton of activity around water transactions through OWEB, but does OWEB follow a similar sort of regional water expert or someone who understands the hydrology of the system providing input? And regardless, could there be synergy between the proposals that might get submitted to PFA versus OWEB, recognizing that there are differences in terms of the objectives of the different programs, but there's also a ton of overlap in that it's a meaningful acquisition that's going to make a difference in terms of hydrology?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Spencer, please.
I was just going to say, yeah, there certainly is overlap in expertise, Andrew. I think it'd be good to leverage the expertise of the OWEB Water Review Committee. It's a statewide review committee, so we don't do like a sub-region analysis. It'd be great if we had enough people within the state to do that and demand for those grants, but currently it's a statewide review.
Thank you, Spencer. Yeah, I don't have any more to add to that other than just to address the what you're alluding at, Andrew, for trying to merge priorities. We're always trying to do that between the two programs, of course, but we also have divergent priorities at the end of the day. So it can be difficult with some of our questions that we ask and they don't, for example.
Well, and it's possible that we, as the PFA, actually drive some regionalization of review for OWEB, right? We could be the ones that show a way of grounding this work more locally, recognizing, as Spencer says, that that's a statewide program with statewide objectives, not as precise as this program is.
Yeah, and it's worth saying too, we're getting much more notoriety in this program statewide. We're getting a lot more overlap with other programs. Applicants are really using us as match or whatever, vice versa kind of thing, as we kind of evolve. So that is just going to happen, essentially. Yeah, I talk with other reviewers from other agencies, and they go, hey, PFA is being used to fund such and such, and they're using it as match. Can we chat? That does happen.
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about these water transactions, it's going to be difficult to determine how they should compete with implementation projects as far as the dollars spent versus the uplift provided. One of the triggers is going to have to be, is the water really the limiting factor? And if it's not, then it may still be a really neat project. There will always be people that are passionate about the project. And so how are we going to remove some of those biases of the advocates for the project if it's not going to provide the same amount of uplift as, say, a culvert replacement that's a fish passage barrier? Is that going to be kind of determined by the stream bio that's going to be doing that initial kind of apples to oranges comparison, as Scott said? Because we aren't able to just look at unit to unit comparison. There's some, how do we compare these things? Scott.
Yeah, Chad, I was having the same struggle. And one of the comments I had early, I think there was reference to a statewide priority map for water transactions. And so that was one for you, Andy. Is it possible to include just a snapshot map of which basins are a priority or sub-basins? I don't know what scale it goes down to, maybe watershed, but where are the priorities? And if a project is clearly not in one of those areas, that kind of gets at what Chad's pointing at right away. It's like, okay, it's nice. It probably helps everything in the long run, but it's not, at the top of the priority scheme. So just that was one thought on how to perhaps, get to what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm. And if you would like to respond.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. Scott, great idea. So that's why we actually have our regional staff in play there. They will be, so there's two factors to this. One, the application can be very similar for these two transaction types as to our regular one. The burden's going to be on the grantee or the applicant to bring forward why their project should be raised above others. There's an opportunity for them to be putting in there what state plans, what priorities does this go with? Why is this important over someone else? We also have our stream bios, our regional bios. That's their role also, to highlight the regional priorities in their area for you guys. They don't make the decision on the grant versus water transaction per se, but they will say, you know, this did take place in a regional area. And then hopefully our water experts are able to substantiate that at the same time. So I think it will come across in conversation, and as we have that dialogue between the committee and stream bios at our in-person meeting, and as we enter the review period. Spencer, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I just going to say that was a great question, Scott. And we're in the final stages of updating a statewide ODFW flow restoration prioritization analysis. So it's based on OWRD's water availability basin scale. So if you're familiar with watershed sizes, it's somewhere between like a Huck 10 and a Huck 12. So relatively fine resolution. And it would be great to incorporate that in this review process.
Thank you for that reminder, Spencer.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Spencer. Yeah, that helps a lot. And in past scoring matrices that I've worked on, we had a component, you know, if your project was in a high priority basin, it automatically got, you know, say 5 points. If it was in a moderate priority, it was 3 points. If it was low, it got 1. So, I mean, it could be as simple as that, but it sounds like folks are on it.
Yep. And then we'll also need that expertise to weigh in on if that water right transaction is enough water to make a difference. That was something that came up in our last grant review. There was some pretty cool projects, but the net impact wasn't necessarily enough to move the needle. So we'll have to get some expert opinions on that as well. Joe, I don't want to take any more time. You've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just adding more to the criteria and prioritization for this. It's kind of complicated now with these new water projects. And it's great to hear from Spencer about that they are internally at ODFW working on a prioritization plan. But I think, you know, pulling all those pieces together and having something written and maybe even like in a flow chart could help us in the committee to kind of go through our own prioritization once it gets to us. So I would just recommend that. I mean, seeing that document that Spencer talked about for ODFW internally would be great, but kind of seeing all the pieces together and in like a flow chart, like if this doesn't work, then it goes here, or if this priority doesn't match, then. So that's just a thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, Joe. I do like having some of those decision support tools. I think that is a great idea. So Andy, if we can get staff to help develop some decision support tools in conjunction with this transaction manual, both for conservation easements as well as the water rights.
Yeah, I appreciate the insight, guys. I'm taking some notes here, and we'll definitely be rolling with some ideas here. Of course, iterative process too. As we kind of move through the years, you know, we'll see what works and what sticks with that.
Andrew Berkey.
Yeah, we had such a flow chart at the Columbia Basin Water Transactions Program when I was at NIFWIF. I don't know if it's still there, but Spencer and Andy reaching out to Femke Freiberg at NIFWIF, who is the manager of the Columbia program. It was a very nice, you know, if this, then you go here. If not, you go down here step by step on the process. That could be a useful model for PFA.
Awesome. Thanks for that resource, Andy. And Andrew, you did say you have to leave around 1. We've got about 15 minutes left and we haven't gotten past the title page. So I would just, if it's okay with the rest of the committee, to just give Andrew the next 10 minutes to go through the comments that he has, and then we can review as a committee. Does that work for everybody? I see Scott's thumbs up. Okay. So Andrew, if you'd like to just lead us through your comments, then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the top, first of all, thanks, Chad. And I'll just say, since I may drop cold, that well, not that kind of cold, but just drop that one. I really appreciated the opportunity to be part of this group from the outset, and we'll continue to observe the progress that you all make. And it's a great program. And Andy and Spencer did a really nice job here. And it's obviously very detailed and very thorough and very rigorous. And at first glance, it might be like, wow, that's a lot of information to be asking applicants for. And it is, because in this space of water rights transactions and stream restoration, there has to be that level of detail to really understand the implications of the acquisition. And further, that level of detail has been part of other funding programs that potential applicants will have been part of, whether it be National Fish and Wildlife, BPA partnership for the Columbia Basin, or OWEB's program. So folks that are in a position to bring transactions forward, such as what Trout Unlimited did in the last solicitation in the Illinois, will have had experience dealing with a proposal form and a checklist that is this detailed. So hopefully they shouldn't be intimidated. Does beg an age-old question, though, of how do we bring other practitioners into this space, others that maybe aren't so focused on water transactions as a tool that they utilize. That could be the land trust community. We haven't seen a ton of land trust activity. In fact, very little land trust activity when it comes to water rights transactions. Could be watershed councils and other type groups. I mean, part of this is that it's obviously complicated and variable in terms of what you achieve by acquiring that asset through a transaction. And then let's be honest, the other piece of it is it could be contentious. You're dealing with water rights and water use in agricultural communities. It can feel like a third rail for some practitioners to get into. So I would just encourage the group to continue to think about, because I think all funders of this are thinking about it. How do you broaden the pool of practitioners beyond what's a pretty small specialized group of entities like Trout Unlimited that we saw this last go round? The couple specific comments I had, Chad, you hit it on the head on one of them, which is back to those two proposals in the Illinois, and really being clear about the relative impact of that proposed acquisition on the hydrology of the system. I might be getting the facts wrong a little bit from last slate, but my recollection is there were two proposals on a stream reach in the Illinois basin or subwatershed that at its lowest flow in the driest year and the driest month was 15 cubic foot per second of water. And the transaction was proposing to restore less than 1 CFS. I think it was even as little as a tenth of a cubic foot per second. And I thought that in the actual proposal form under question 38, that Spencer and Andy did a great job of honing in on that question. What is the flow target this project is trying to address, and when? How was it established? On average, what percentage of it will be reached from this transaction alone and or in combination with other transactions that are either completed or planned into the future? I think the manual could be more explicit along those lines. I don't think it has to be that detailed, but the manual speaks to, let me enlarge my screen to see where this is. Water transactions review process and evaluation criteria. Number one, first bullet under number one, achieves or helps to achieve any professionally accepted flow target during the period of use. And the the detail.
Andrew, sorry,
Yeah.
what page is that on? Just so I can bring it up.
Yeah, let me look real quick.
If you don't have it, don't worry.
Yeah, I can tell you here real quick.
Andrew, I believe you were in the application questions. Is that correct?
I was in the questions and now I'm referring back to the manual in the language
Okay.
that was in the manual. Yeah. And the language in the manual is on page, looks like 13 of the actual document, labeled number 13. Yeah. And the assertion is achieves or helps to achieve any professionally accepted flow target during the period of use. I think the manual can be stronger about achieves or helps to achieve and what that means. I don't think we need to reiterate the language from the actual application on what percentage, et cetera. Even the insertion of meaningfully achieve or help to meaningfully achieve implies that this has got to be more than 1/10 of a cubic foot per second. And I'm not picking on that proposal. Those guys are working hard. I'm just using it as an example. That sets the stage for when they respond to this questionnaire. It's like, how big of an impact is this in and of itself going to have, and in relationship to other flow transactions, either previously completed or planned? How's that all going to add up into some kind of meaningful impact? So that was my primary comment, and it just in large part I was looking at it because of the conversation we had in that last solicitation. So I'll pause there and see if Spencer or Andy have any thoughts or reaction to that, or anybody else for that matter.
No, I'd say those are great comments, Andrew. Of course, the thing always to keep in mind is the term of the deal. I think in the Illinois case, they were permanent, and then
Yes.
the priority date of the water right, that matters tremendously. And then the merits of a single project versus a multi-year effort are really contingent on the setting. If you're on a small creek with 1 or 2 water users, maybe a single transaction for a small amount is impactful. Whereas on a system like the Illinois, that's going to be a long-term concerted effort that's going to require a host of different deals and things like that, that in combination, hopefully will achieve the target. But one project alone shouldn't be looked at in isolation.
Yeah, I really like Spencer's comments because it isn't just that instantaneous impact of this water relative to the flow target, but there's a time element to it as well. Like if it's a 1-year lease, that's great if it's all of the flow that needs to be achieved, but it's for 1 year, and then what happens the next year? So understanding that, and if it's temporary, probably having a higher threshold of evidence as to how you're going to build on that to achieve the impact over time. And then similarly on Spencer's comment about if it's a small part of the overall flow objective, that raises the burden for, hey, how does this fit into a broader strategy? Like, what are your plans for building on this one, particularly if it's a permanent one? I think Spencer's point's really good that, hey, permanent's a start. That's a foothold. That is there in perpetuity. Okay, so what are you going to do to go from 1/10 of a CFS to get to 15 CFS? And having more justification for this idea of a portfolio and building the portfolio, I think is good, and expecting that from the applicant.
I think that's
The
well
other,
said,
yeah,
Andrew.
okay.
I do hesitate a little bit when we talk about building on, the one small project and then the plans for bringing in other projects to have more of a portfolio. If that portfolio isn't guaranteed with the funding, then you're investing potentially a large amount of money. These are, though they don't tend to be, low cost projects. And so there is no assurance that you are going to, start this snowball of people signing up in a program. And I guess if I were evaluating, I'd prefer to see the portfolio funded at once rather than funding a high cost project with little impact on the hope that someday maybe we will have another water user being willing to participate in the program. That gives me a little pause as far as where is the best money spent, especially understanding the limitations, right? We don't have full funding currently, and every year we've had to make some pretty tough calls about really good projects that we weren't able to fund. All things that we're going to have to consider.
And so just to add to that, I think, 1 year lease, it could be really cheap. It could be like a demonstration. Maybe there's more of an appetite to say, hey, we'll pay $5,000 for a lease this year on this because of a case that the applicants made as to how they're going to build out from that. But that's different than a couple $100,000 on a small amount of money or a small amount of water.
Chad,
Absolutely. Thanks,
I just want to note that Bobby's also here with me and Spencer promoting FW too. So we need to get something, not just general member, public.
Yeah, I saw his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly note that, like, especially in the case of the project we're talking about out in Kirby on Illinois, the Illinois River, I think it's important to note that even with some of these smaller quantities of water for these projects, especially the permanent transfers, a lot of that, if there's already in-stream rights on that system, they can be additive to,
Yes.
take us to that target goal. And it provides an extremely valuable regulation tool for OWRD in those systems when we're looking at very senior water rights on those systems. So, and that's kind of what I feel like that should be noted when you're looking at even smaller quantities. If it still is an extremely senior priority date, it can be an effective tool to add to that in-stream benefit so that, we can see regulation occur more like early and often in the season, which can then provide a huge benefit to fish later in the season.
Good point. And I feel like the checklist and the manual both get into that sort of relative seniority and priority and the ability to regulate, or the ability for it to be wet water that is additive to the system. So just in to you, they do great work. So I'm not trying to relitigate this project. We went through this in the spring, and I think there was a lot of good stuff in there, but it's the example we have. And so the point here is that really understanding that relative impact at scale to what is the ecological need, because ultimately we're talking about what's the bang for buck we're getting from it relative to the bang for the buck we're going to get from other actions, whether that be a culvert or something else. And then the last other comment I had, it's already been addressed, I saw in the comments, which was that broad list of transaction types on one of the documents. It did not include those non-OWRD agreements. And I saw a note between Spencer and Andy that, hey, the list needs to include forbearance agreements and other types of agreements. So I think we're good there. So yeah, that's what I have at 12:59. So I made it under the umbrella.
That's great, Andrew. In the minute we have remaining, I just want to thank you for all of your contributions to the program. One of the original members of the committee, done so much for us, and your expertise on these topics has been invaluable. So just want to pause and say thank you for all of the years of work.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was a pleasure to work with you all on this. So I'll be keeping tabs. Thank you all for the chance to do this.
Thank you. Now that you've shown all of your expertise, you can expect some outreach for sharing some more of it.
That's fair.
Thank you,
Spencer,
Andrew.
give me a call. Andy, give me a call. All right. Talk
Will
later.
do, Andrew. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Any comments on what Andrew had shared? Okay, I will take that as general support for some of the recommendations that he made. Courtney, you got your hand up.
Well, I think he brought some things up that I found I struggled with a little bit. There was a lot of detail in the application and some of the questions that was non-explicitly or always covered in the manual. And my default was that it should be in the manual, that the manual is the more evergreen collateral for this. And so that was a question I had, was should we be focusing more on that manual component?
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. And I do believe that the manual, in your words, is kind of the more evergreen component here. And it's easier for us to adjust the application questions over time, but we should really nail down the transaction manual itself that the application questions come from. See a few heads nodding. Scott?
Yeah, just a thought as I was listening to some of the comments, and Andy, maybe just something to file away for future reference. I do not live in the water rights world in my past life, my career, and so this is somewhat new to me. And if there are great case study examples where, perhaps it could be a 20-minute presentation at one of our committee meetings on, hey, Project X, we worked on it over 5 years. We got, 5 landowners involved. It amounted to this much water return to the stream. Like if there is a good case study to help us get our heads wrapped around some quantitative examples where, yes, this was indeed successful for the resource, I think that might be helpful.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll note that.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. It would be helpful to understand what a high quality project would look like, as well as some that might not meet various requirements, either not enough uplift to make a significant difference, or any other reasons why it may not score as well. So we can kind of compare and contrast what the good projects look like versus ones that maybe are less competitive, with the frame that we are trying to provide uplift to the covered species, right? Which may be a little bit different than some other water rights acquisitions funding pathways. And we've seen that with all of the projects, is that we need to look at it through the lens of what is the uplift provided to the HCP covered species.
Mm-hmm.
Has everybody had a chance to go through the eligible and ineligible costs portion? I think the eligible water transaction types looks good. Applicants looks good. And I do see that nonprofits are included in this one. And then we get into the eligible and ineligible costs. Andy, where did this list of personnel and administrative costs come from? Is this kind of a template pulled from another program? I'm seeing things like attorney fees related to due diligence to determine whether it can even go through, right? Or advertising for public notices, room or venue rental.
Yes, it came from other grant programs. Some of this is stuff we pay for currently in our grant program, not some that you just called out, but it's a combination of all of the above. Oftentimes, probably goes without saying, there's a lot that gets swept into the creation of these projects.
Courtney, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so this was an area that I flagged really in both programs, this discussion about funding and in some cases retroactive funding of due diligence or legal fees. And I was curious the rest of the committee's perspective in my initial read on this, and feeling like this program is about dollars going into action and not planning. Is it necessary that we use this grant to fund due diligence? And I know due diligence is important to happen, but is it an appropriate use of this grant?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Because would the project occur without us funding due diligence? If so, then, is this investment by our committee really making the difference, or would the project occur anyway?
Well, and I guess to expand, due diligence is a moment in any project's life cycle where you're trying to understand if it's worthy of pursuing. And I think that when, in my experience in reviewing past projects, what we've said is that we're asking them, we're beyond that point. And we are engaging in a discussion about the level of uplift that is being analyzed, and a mitigation plan or a stewardship plan is in place to generate. And so if we're still in a phase of funding due diligence, there is a very likely outcome in which the due diligence says it is not feasible. Or in fact, it is otherwise feasible based on other things being needed. And so then that comes back into my question about, what are we funding? Are we funding implementation of projects to create uplift, or are we funding discovery of projects that may have uplift?
Can you speak to that, Andy?
Yeah. Courtney, are you now? Well, I guess my gut instinct is going to go back to legislative intent. Planning is an applicable project type under this grant program. So whatever form that takes, it is acceptable. One thing that I want to help the committee frame, because it is a great question. It is a very good question. Partition what of due diligence you want to fund. Think about the current funding environment too. We may want to have these fully baked projects coming in front of us all the time. It would be great. But we might be precluding projects because they aren't getting that funding right now. Do we have to make up for that gap of funding? No, we don't. But that's how I would preface it. But going back to the intent of this program, planning is an acceptable project type. So for example, maybe though, from what Courtney's saying, they should have stuff ready by the time they apply for acquisition. So maybe the solution for someone that wants to have some planning, well, they go into our planning bucket, and they say we're applying for planning funding, and they don't apply under the acquisition. I didn't even think about that being an option, but now that you say that, Courtney, something like that could happen.
Yeah, I guess, Andy, the difference between planning for a habitat improvement project and planning for an acquisition of a water right are quite different, both in the certainty of the project being able to be executed and the costs associated. If you need schematics or engineering for a beaver dam analog, you probably know that you are going to be able to place the beaver dam analog in that stream. But if we're calling appraisals planning, and if it's quite likely, as appraisals tend to be, that maybe it doesn't make sense after the appraisal's done, then we have invested money from our program into a project that never occurred.
Well, we won't be making any due diligence funding. If they don't get funded by us, we don't pay for them. So if I have an intent otherwise in this guidance document, then I need to correct that. But yeah, we would only be paying back the due diligence of it. And most of the people that we are working with in this program do have a small budget at the end of the day, right? They have a small bottom line, but we can cherry pick this. We don't have to pay for due diligence costs. I pulled this just for, I do believe from OWEB, I want to say, and OWEB very progressive in that sense when it comes to funding due diligence, especially with these small organizations that we cater to also. And we also put, I'm sorry, Chad, we can put caps on stuff too, even if we want to. We say no due diligence, no pre-agreement costs, that's fine. Or we say 10% of your funding you can get pre-agreement or something, so why big slate?
And then another one that I think we need to discuss as a committee is the bridge loan interest. Do we want to be funding interest payments on loans that have been taken out prior to a funding decision? I'm not sure that that's an appropriate cost to cover. But I would be open to discussion from the committee, or if a strong case can be made that it should be. I just think it's something that we need to discuss. Can you maybe describe the bridge loan, the function of a bridge loan, who those interest payments usually go to, Andy? Who's benefiting from the interest on those bridge loans in these transactions?
So I don't have my real estate or that expert with me today, so I don't want to speak to it to its full extent, but I can follow up and I'll note this comment and I'll be able to follow up to just give you a better answer at that. I just don't want to speak.
And also the timing on that bridge loan. Like, is it, we've made a funding decision and then they get the bridge loan the next day so they can execute the agreement right away, and then we're paying the interest until we can get them the money? Or is it they've got a project, they took out a loan, they've been making interest payments and they want to pay it off, and so they apply to us for funding that project? I think there's some more to discuss there.
Perfect. I will note this down, along with any other general questions, by the way, and I can put this in meeting minutes after, so the committee can continue to chew on this stuff too. So I'll capture all that, but I'll consult.
And that expert might have an answer that just as clear as day, and of course it should be included.
And what we do at
I recognize I'm
ODFW
ignorant
too.
to some of this stuff, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but these are red flags for me.
I appreciate it.
Then are there any other of these approved costs that folks have had a chance to look at? Courtney, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so it's just kind of, some of it's also understanding precedence. So the pre-agreement cost section allows for backwards recapture of up to 3 years. Do we do that in any of the other, is this a new, do we have this already? And
Nope,
Okay.
we're not doing this. Would be a new thing that's brought over from another state
and is
program.
this because it has some precedence with other is this an example
Yes.
of like other programs have it?
Correct.
Okay, I think you mentioned that.
Thank you for bringing that up. But yes, it would have been brought from other programs.
Okay. I mean, for me, this was an area again, and I guess I'm just repeating myself a little bit, which is
Mhm.
that could consume quite a bit of the grant, and we would be
Mhm.
reviewing it through that process, which I figure would factor into our decision making, knowing how much of the dollars that go out on a grant award would be just paying past bills, which is
Mhm.
very different than moving things forward. But those are examples where the but for test in my head doesn't get met, because but for this grant they would have already spent it. That's why we're reimbursing backwards. And so I would be, my instinct is that this is not a place to open up for this program, and would be interested in how people who work more in this sphere might perceive that to impact success or failure of a project.
Great question.
Maybe Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, Andy, when you said the reimbursement part for going back 3 years was brought over from other programs, were those programs within the department or from OEB or other state partners, or where were you seeing that?
So it's difficult for me to say where every one of these are brought from. So I've been working on this guidance document for 2 years as of this point. And of those 2 years, a lot of language gets moved and molded. So I've worked with my internal, and I apologize that I didn't bring him in today. He's a really good real estate guy. And we've reviewed a lot of this stuff too. So all that to be said, Mark, I don't know exactly where it would have came from right at this point. But again, these are just stuff that I've brought in from other agencies. So it wasn't a matter of like, kind of, we think this is best, put this like in here to an extent. It was more like, this is kind of a status quo per se that's going on with some sister agencies. This is what grantees, applicants are used to right now, do we want to do that? Do we want to refine it a bit? So think of it as more of a boilerplate, and I hope that makes sense. So it's not that I'm saying like, if we cross this stuff out, that's perfect. That's okay. We can do that. So hopefully that kind of gets that across. I'm not trying to force any of this stuff on you as a committee decision. And
Yeah,
I
no,
know
I
you
get
all
that.
these questions.
I get that. I was just looking for context of, if
Yeah, I
OEB
apologize.
and the R&E board all had this stuff, that would give me a little stronger measure of comfort with it or not. So that was the genesis of my question.
Yeah, I apologize. I'd be doing some speculation at a certain point where this is. My memory's not that great.
No problem, Andy. You've been working on this for a long time. I do have another question. So in the ineligible costs, we talk about ceremonial, publicity, or entertainment. But then in eligible costs, we've got advertising, we've got communication and correspondence, and public hearings. And how is that advertising, communications, and all of that distinctly different than publicity?
Thank you for that question. Publicity is probably a poor word in there. That should probably hold ceremonial and entertainment expenses, which, just to elaborate on, would be like hosting some kind of banquet dinner or something with these funds that contribute to it, right? If that's what I'm thinking in that sense. Publicity should probably get marked out of there because, yeah, that's now contradicting the above statement. Advertising is important, right? We want to make sure that signs get put up on these sites that say who got funded, how they got funded. We want to make sure that press releases get out there and are funded for if there's an acquisition going on in a neighborhood. And we want to make sure the neighbors know about it. We want to be able to fund that stuff. That's important. But that would be my distinction.
Stakeholder engagement is critical.
Mhm.
And I would hate to see hesitancy to do that because you're afraid of publicity cost being ineligible.
Yeah, I should just, that's an oversight. Thank you.
Well, we are on page 5. We have a long ways to go and we don't have a lot of time left. What does the committee think? Do we continue kind of page by page and kick this to the next meeting as well? Do we want to come back to Andy with our own red line versions and then discuss? I just want to kind of take the temperature of the committee at this point, given the amount of time we have left. Is this structure working for folks to kind of work through the document one page at a time? Or should we each do this on our own and send it back to Andy and then discuss?
I
Joe,
could go either way. Oh, sorry, Chen.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott. Go ahead, and then we'll go to Joe.
Okay, I could go either way. So I mean, we don't have much time left, so I don't think we're going to make it through or even broach the land transaction one at this point. But I'll follow whatever the group wants to do.
Joe, what are your thoughts?
I kind of like the way we're doing it now, even though it's slower. It gives us the ability to go back and forth, talk to ODFW staff while they're here. For me, that's the way I'm digging it right now.
Well, Courtney?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I agree. I actually could see benefit in, it's going to take longer, but there's a little bit of both. This process is helpful because I'm learning things from Andy and I'm learning context that I didn't have when I went through it. I think if we have the ability to still give you some red lines, then I don't have to do the tic-tacky stuff.
Yeah.
So.
For what it's worth, I feel the same way. I think there's consensus. Mark, are you okay with this kind of saying? Great. Andy, go ahead.
And yeah, just to echo and to paint the picture for committee members that weren't here, when we were performing a solicitation, we had a very similar process, if I recall correctly, and it worked out great. Chad, I would encourage that after today's meeting, maybe I do get some red line for at least just the water transaction stuff, because that's probably what we're going to make it to. And then I can try to combine stuff and resubmit for to the committee those comments, and address stuff in that. And then maybe when we do conservation easements in October, you guys have a lot of PFA in 3 weeks. Sorry, but when we do conservation easements in early October, you can then submit maybe those comments too when you have a chance. If you have time beforehand, great. But that would be kind of my thought there, Chad. And then maybe, October, November, we come back with all the comments kind of thing, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think working through the water transactions until it's complete is worthwhile. And then that gives us one more completed project type that can be included on the next solicitation, which may or may not be this year, depending on when it's completed. And then we can complete the land transactions. so that we're not confusing, back and forth between the two different types of projects. We can just kind of stay focused on the one and then move to the other instead of bouncing back and forth. I also find a lot of value in being able to have an open discussion about this, but then provide red lines for the more ticky-tacky type of language changes. I just wanted to check in with the committee to make sure that others have also found it valuable. Sounds like we do, so we can carry on. So with that, are we all good with the eligible and ineligible costs discussion at this point, knowing that we can provide comment to Andy later? Courtney.
I had one last little question. There is quite a bit of legal that is allowed for it, and that's because that's a big part of acquisition. But there was a question on, thank you for rolling up there. It was maybe, this is not my world fully, so I in the personnel administration costs, so scroll up a little bit. We talk about a wide range of attorney fees related to due diligence, titles, contracts, but the broad water law issues, I think what I was trying to understand, I see this as just kind of closing types of activities, or not necessarily legal precedents, or interpretation, or so I just a caution that we're not necessarily getting into funding, legal test of things, or it's just very broad.
Andy, you want to respond?
Yeah, and thank you, Courtney. And just a reminder, as the committee does review stuff, you're able to cherry pick what you do want to fund in the application, right? They're applying for funding. I know, and I know it's easy to say that, but it's hard, right? You're gonna have to, you have a lot of applications. We're only getting more competitive in this program, which is great. We're getting more popular. People are really liking it. But just as a reminder, when it comes down to stuff, if something you think is out of lane, it is strenuous costs. We're able to say, okay, everything but.
That's helpful, Andy. And the purpose of, I think, the comment is that we're trying to filter out as much of that before it even gets to us, recognizing that these applications are rigorous and we don't want to waste anyone else's time either, right? So if we don't filter those things out and they put time into preparing them and bring them to us, then they're reviewed by the review teams, then they're reviewed by us. And if we know right out of the gate that those things should not be included, we can save that time of every person who engages with that document or application prior to that. So it's not necessarily to try to be a gate. It's, or say we only want this and not that, but it's to honor everyone's time. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking of Courtney about what you said, and I have partly the same reaction when I read through the list of, sounds like some of these categories are big enough to, drive a truck through a barn, so to speak, to. But I do think you come back to the one line that says cost must be directly tied to the execution of the water transaction. So there's some balance in there to, I think, try and narrow what otherwise seem to be pretty open-ended considerations. I do think, as Chad, you were just saying, as we read the project proposal, we'll have some ability to tease those things in and out and see which side of the fence they fall on.
Andy, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And I'm hoping that our regional staff will be able to highlight some of those costs that they seem is not appropriate for it, and they'd be able to help flag some of that too.
Andy, can you provide a little more color behind what personnel and administrative costs under negotiations and stakeholder engagement would look like? What costs would the applicant incur from negotiations that would be an appropriate cost?
Good question. So let's assume we're not doing a pre-agreement cost. Let's assume that a negotiation is a post-agreement effort. Sometimes, it's probably a little bit too prescriptive. it can probably be removed and just broadened under personnel service and hours, right? But it's the opportunity for grantees to adaptively manage their project in an ongoing just discussion with landowners. Stuff changes sometimes when the agreements get sent out. Not in, significant changes. We flag those, we work with those, we work with you guys on it. But it's just a reiteration that under their personnel hours, they can do it. I don't like to get super prescriptive. Like I said, starting this response is probably a little bit too prescriptive here. But that's what I would imagine that intent came from, is that, it's okay to go to a landowner. If the landowner is having cold feet or something like that, and they're saying, I'm going to pull out, maybe they want to go spend 5 hours talking to a landowner or something. And that's okay. But that should be assumed under personnel costs as a project cost anyways. So.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we can, some of these are pretty broad, but some of them are very specific, and I'm wondering if we can consolidate any of them. Advertising for public notices or hearings feels like stakeholder engagement.
I'll make a note. Thank you.
Negotiations also could feel like stakeholder engagement. And those are ways that we can just shorten up the list of eligible costs, recognizing if it feels like stakeholder engagement, those are all going to be covered, and we don't necessarily need to list it out.
Thank you.
Because as Mark had pointed out, all of them, you need to be able to show that they're directly tied to the execution of the transaction. So I think it's okay to be a little more broad in these bullets, recognizing that they all have to be tied back to the execution of the transaction.
Thank you.
Any more comments on costs? Eligible, pre-agreement. Up to 3 years, that's a long time prior to the project agreement. That's just what my gut tells me. Maybe that's status quo. But especially when we look at bridge loan interest for potentially a 3-year loan, and then we're going to pay back the interest on that as well. I don't know. I'd like to get people's thoughts. Courtney?
I think my thought on these would be, like in some of the lists, to do some striking or some edits where I see things could be rolled up. I think salaries and benefits creates a great moment to encompass, like if they did want to go talk to a property owner or something. And similarly, like with these pre-agreement costs. And what I wonder, Andy, is if, we're having this discussion, we now know you're open to seeing this various lenses. We send that your way. Does that create a valuable next conversation for us all where, you're able to kind of say, the majority of you struck this item, or nobody struck this item. So it seems like we have consensus. Is that helpful?
Short answer is that is always helpful. Whenever I send you guys a document, I expect red lines, like in the sense of if there are any. But whenever I send you guys a document, we're here to work together, the department and the committee, on moving these documents forward in this program. So yes, please do. Please use track changes though. Please just don't highlight strike through. That's very difficult for me to go through like 8 things like that. But using track changes, that's always great. That's kind of what we did, Courtney, previously, is we'd have kind of a discussion about it in our solicitation, send stuff back to me, and then I would combine edits and track changes and stuff, and then address comments, and then work through a committee meeting that way. So a little bit slower, but everyone kind of gets their ideas across. And that's like when I can see how, when you redline stuff, when you're condensing and whatnot, that's exactly what we're looking for.
On the pre-agreement, that is a much larger category and eliminating that as an eligible expense to me seems to help certain projects rise to the top and communicate some things about pre-planning. Potentially, I can see the value though. So that's my perspective on that category. I'd be interested in others that that operate in this sphere more often.
Yep. Helpful comments. Andy, can you scroll up to page 6, please, under additional budget considerations? A lot of this under water transaction grants may be applied to feels like everything else condensed into just really what we're talking about, which is the purchase price and the purchase option fees associated with it, interest on bridge loans, and this is clarifying that it needed to secure closure on the property interest prior to when funding will be available for distribution. So this tells me that the bridge loan is after the award, but before the funds are available. That's how I would interpret that. If it is something other than that, then please clarify that.
Thank you.
But otherwise, I don't really think that we should be funding bridge loan interest for 3 years prior to it coming to our committee for consideration. Because if the bridge loan was taken out 3 years ago, we didn't even have this program. I don't know. And then also, what is no minimum of maximums exists on funding requests? Is that meant to be an or, no minimum or maximum? Under additional budget considerations?
No minimum, yes. Thank you.
Great. And then the rest of these all seem like they're right in line with, hey, it has to be directly tied to the project cost. Baseline inventories, preparing management plans. I'm a little confused on what a management plan for a water right might look like, but again, I'm not experienced in this space, so maybe that's pretty standard. Closing fees, cost of securing and maintaining the conservation values. That feels like a consolidated list of everything in the bullet points above. So we're pretty specific and then we get more broad. I don't know. Maybe we just put the broad strokes at the top and then the specific eligible and ineligible. Because this additional budget considerations feels more like an introduction. These all need to be tied directly to the project, and these are broader buckets. And then specifically, here's what we do and do not allow. What do folks think about that? Moving kind of this set of 8 bullets up and then specifying exactly what we do and do not fund below that. Or do we like the structure? Courtney?
I'm thinking maybe somebody else would pop on, but just feeling talkative today, I guess. One of the bullets in the middle of this I had also flagged because it gets back to cost of due diligence activities. So I agree moving this up. This goes more general. But maybe there's some refinement in bullet 4. I'm still at a position where it would be helpful to have certain things concluded, like an appraisal and some due diligence already underway, because that's part of how we evaluate. That's information needed to evaluate the proposal. So I agree, just with some refinement to bullet 4.
Yeah, more broad here is what you're implying? Or did I misinterpret that? Let's type in another note.
It would be the cost, of surveyor title review or applicant's legal fees incurred. I would remove
I see.
some of the due diligence activities and appraisal.
And that's something I can capture when you send track changes to me too. Okay.
And then Andy, I would also suggest we take the additional descriptions of eligible costs based on the comprehensive budget sheet are listed below that line with the 4 bullets below that, and put that right above the eligible project costs. And so then that shows them, okay, I need to list the line item costs as precisely as possible. and here are the line items that they could go under. So we start with this general water transaction grants may be applied to section. And then we give the instruction, additional descriptions of eligible costs based on the budget sheet are listed below, and then make it precise. And then we give them what those line items can be. That's not really a material change. It's more of just a structure change.
Appreciate it.
But I think it would help. Again, I don't have a lot of experience in this space, so I'm looking to Mark and others. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of digesting all our conversation around the due diligence stuff and appraisal, and I think, you know, I agree with Courtney. I wouldn't want to fund a project that's coming to us asking us to, well, can you fund this appraisal so we can decide if this is a viable project? However, I think an applicant may have done an appraisal within the past 3 years as they built up to this project. They might have even done some environmental site assessment just to see if it's clear of any hazmat stuff or address that. And so in that case, when they've already done it and then they decide to go forward and come and apply, it seems like some of those costs, which help them get to the point where we have a viable project, you know, might be reasonable reimbursement expenses. And I think appraisals, that's often the case, I think, on land acquisition deals that, you know, if they go through, the appraisal is considered part of the project package price. It doesn't mean we have to reimburse if the project is not approved. Obviously, the applicant's, you know, making that going to cover that expense if the project ultimately doesn't go forward. So I think there's a little bit of a difference about some of the due diligence stuff of if it's already done when they come to us versus if they're asking us to pay for it before they have any idea what it's going to generate.
That's a great point, Mark. And I think that gets to the difference between a reimbursable or a proactive expense. So maybe we're, as a committee, comfortable reimbursing some of those expenses incurred to get the project ready to come to us. But maybe we're less comfortable funding that exploratory phase to see if a project is even viable in the first place. If that is the case, we can clarify that in the document and say that the due diligence and appraisal expenses are reimbursable. But we can also clarify that we're not going to proactively fund those. So I guess that's a question for the committee. Courtney?
I think, I mean, you know, maybe reimbursable could be a way to get at it. I think if we end up looking at grant applications and there is a robust amount of past work that we'll be expecting to reimburse. I guess I'd like to make sure we know that up front. And we're not, and I want to relook at the questions through that lens, you know, to make sure that we're not funding something that is heavy on the reimbursement, lean on the finalization, but
I think also it becomes part of the overall cost effectiveness of the project. If somebody comes to us with
Yes.
a gazillion dollars of sort of pre-project costs, I think we're not gonna feel that it's very cost effective relative to the outcome. So I think in the project composition, we'll have the opportunity to sort of see where there's problems or where we're comfortable with it.
Joe, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that again, it maybe gets to knowing more about the criteria about specific projects, and if we have a detailed criteria list of how to evaluate whether something is viable or not, that might lend insight into whether we want to, in some situations, support it or not. But yeah, Or maybe we can just put language in here to clarify that regarding how you guys are actually talking about right now about it depends on prior information about the project and so forth. I don't have the exact language in my head right now. But
I can speak just for myself, and that's all that I can speak for, is that I would rather see appraisals and due diligence be reimbursable costs than coming to us asking for proactive funding to do due diligence and appraisals to determine a project's viability. So for me, I would be comfortable saying that the due diligence costs, the appraisal costs are reimbursable, but will not be proactively funded. And I think I'm comfortable with that. But if we want to keep it more open, that's totally fine too.
I'm fine with that.
Scott.
Yeah, I think the way you just said it, Chad, I'm very comfortable with that. It seemed like there was, based on the comments earlier, there was some discomfort with speculative funding of that work. And I agree with that. So what you described, Chad, I'm there with you.
Mark, Courtney, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share?
I'm generally there with you as well. What I'm realizing is it places a lot of value for me on the evaluation process, because if we have an application coming in that is going to be seeking reimbursement for past work we weren't involved in, but it's also lean on its management plan or uplift and outcomes metrics, that for me will be a place of really questioning the fit. And so I think that gets to some of what we were talking about earlier, which is it places a lot of responsibility for us to understand our own metrics for
Yes.
which is a pro and a con as well. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the conversation. I always learn a lot with this group.
Yeah.
In a good way.
I certainly do as well. Sometimes I feel like I'm swimming in the deep end, but that's okay. Mark, you had your hand up and you came off mute. Did you have anything you'd like to add?
I was just going to say, I'm comfortable with the conversation we've had, and I think, we have some opportunity to review the quote reimbursable costs. And again, I think it's all going to play out on is the cost worth the benefit and vice versa, and that's how the project will get ranked. So
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good reminder that process still occurs and it still goes into the hopper with all of the other projects and they all compete against each other. So that is helpful. Andy, you've got your hand up.
I just want to flag, Chad, we're approaching the end of the meeting here, and I did want to spend just 5 minutes of time talking about the Coos Bay field trip when we do get there.
Well, I think we're at a decent spot given that discussion we just had. I want to let Scott respond, and then maybe we can propose going to you, Andy, and then you can outline what you think would be helpful for us to provide you for the next steps to get this transaction manual for the water rights transactions to a better place. So with that, Scott, you had your hand up.
This will just show my ignorance on this topic, but Andy, could you scroll up to the basically the list of eligible projects right there? Is there a commonly accepted definition of those? I'm looking at the top 4 bullets under in-stream flow, and it occurred to me that I didn't know exactly. I mean, I thought I knew what these meant, but if there's an accepted definition, that would be helpful in terms of, what is a time limited in-stream transfer? Is that a standard 5-year, or is that specified case by case? Same with some of these others, just a simple definition so that we knew what we were talking about.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe I can do that and point you guys to some just examples and stuff from the department. Great question, Scott. We're all learning in this. I've consulted plenty of water professionals getting this document created myself. Great question. Follow up on that.
That's great.
Let me just take this.
Your hand up, and then we're going to go to Andy for a conclusion.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to that real quick. So for full season in-stream leases, your typical temporary transfer for that water being in-stream during the entirety of the irrigation season, and that can be between 1 and 5 years as a temporary lease. Split season is basically self-explanatory. It's part of the irrigation season. It can also be 1 to 5 years. Permanent in-stream transfer, it's going to be in stream in perpetuity, and time limited is also considered a permanent transfer, but it is anything greater than 5 years between, and I think it's technically 5 to 99 years.
Wow.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks for that, Bobby. Right away, you just helped prioritize each of those 4 in my mind in terms of their potential value and uplift. So
I also wanted to quickly note, if I could, that the valuation of water rights is something that not a lot of people are doing. Mainly Westwater is kind of the only one that I've known, and they've done it on a basin-wide scale for the Klamath and the Rogue. But that's for people to do individual valuations. That could be a huge cost initially, and that may be a barrier to entry for a demographic of people that may, where we could still find really good projects. So I just kind of wanted to bring that to the attention of the committee, that maybe, I don't know, maybe it can still be an eligible cost, but it's something that I just don't want it to pose a barrier to maybe financially struggling demographics that still have really good water rights. That would be a huge benefit to that system.
Yeah, Bobby, when you're talking about the financially struggling demographics, are you talking about the water rights holders that we would be seeking to acquire the water rights from?
Yes, exactly. I think a lot of people that have specifically that demographic of people may be looking to other options outside of farming, where they're not being able to make ends meet, and water rights being pertinent to land, they own that property. They may look at this as an avenue of a conservation play to then potentially, make ends meet. But I really wanted to specifically say, with land use for farming different crops, that's going to require different valuation for that water. So it's always going to be case by case. We would be offering, somebody with pasture land that's just watering pasture and livestock a lot less money than somebody that's, growing alfalfa. So I just
Helpful,
felt like
Bobby.
it was.
I will just say that the evaluations will be done by the applicants, not by the person who holds the water right. The valuations would be done by the easement holder or the water rights holder at the end, not the property owner. And second, we're investing significant public funding here, and we will need some kind of valuation to justify why we are spending what we are spending. So I'm not comfortable saying that it should not be a requirement to have some sort of appraisal or valuation tied with those water rights. And we should also not be paying, the forbearance for prime alfalfa growing ground, watering that, if it was only ever going to be rangeland. That's not necessarily an equitable solution, even if it's helping financially disadvantaged communities. So
I absolutely agree with you there.
And with that, Andy, we've taken up more of your time, so we'll just go to you and you can outline our next steps.
No problem. Well, thank you everyone for a productive conversation today. I appreciate it. Thank you, Bobby and Spencer, for taking the time to participate in the discussion too. Super helpful. Yeah, so I guess I have one question. First, our next meeting is on the calendar for 2 weeks from today. I think it is useful, as Chad said, to work through these one at a time. I worked through all 3 solicitations, especially the last few months, and I look at one, I think I'm in another, but I'm probably working in the third, and I confuse stuff. So all that to say, Chad, I do support the idea of maybe we work through this water one first, and then we work through conservation easements. That said, what I would propose is twofold. I'm thinking that we might want to push the next meeting back, the committee meeting, because I'd like to get edits or track changes from all of you. If we can deliver that to me in the next 10 days, that'd be helpful, but we're really busy this week with the field trip. So I'd like to actually, and me and Chad, we can look at times later maybe or something, but maybe I can do a survey for the committee or something, but maybe end of this month, we have our October meeting, or end of next month. We push it a few weeks out. So you guys have more time to work through this.
I really appreciate that. And I think that is a good recommendation. And I'm just remembering, do we also have any other items that we need to take care of, any elections or anything? Is that this meeting?
We sure do have an elections that we need. Thank you, Chad, for that reminder. So I think we're going to go.
Have that not occur, and we've got 9 minutes left.
Thank you. So yes, we do have the elections that we want to do too. We can also
we can kick that to the next meeting as well if that's appropriate.
Yeah, we actually the elections.
I would just like to
think
get.
it's not on the agenda, is it?
No.
Is it not?
No, it's not. But I'm pretty sure that it needs to be addressed. So.
Yeah, and that's fine. You have bottom of the agenda does state a disclaimer. We're able to add to the agenda at the chair's discretion. So we can definitely hold some elections out. I'm gonna leave it up to you, Chad. What do you want to do with that?
Well, is the committee comfortable going through that process now, or would we rather wait? I can see advantages to both. We can do it now, or as long as there's no problems kicking it out. I don't know, Andy. Would we be in violation of anything?
No, we have quorum today. Five of the 7 committee members are present on the call. We do anticipate new committee members to be joining next month at the governor's appointment. When we do hear from that, I'll let you guys know immediately, but the anticipation is on the 5th, I believe. There is no issue though, holding the election next month. I don't see any concern with that.
Well, if it's okay with the committee, we can do that in the next 5 to 7 minutes. And Andy, can you lead us through what we need to do?
Yes. Give me a minute here. I can briefly conclude with the field trip overview. It won't be too long. So we're going to hold new elections. We need to hold an election for the chair, Chad's current role, as it expires, after this month. So what that means is it's an opportunity.
It expires today, right? This is the end of the month.
Yes, expires today, end of the month. So how it will work is we have a quorum of 5 members here, so we're able to hold a vote for it. And apology that I didn't get that on the agenda. It should have been there. What we would need first is a nomination and then a second of that nomination. And then we would do a roll call vote at that point of a yay or nay, as I count off everyone's names present. And then whatever carries moves forward at that point. Chad, with that, we can open up for nominations at this point, or hand back to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Courtney, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I would nominate you to maintain chair moving forward at this point. And Mark is still in vice chair, I think, at this point as well. So.
Do we have a second?
I'd second that.
Yeah.
All right, let me just take a quick note here. Oh, I do have Caleb on here taking notes. Awesome, thank you. All right, seconded by Scott. Great. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Give me a minute to pull up my list here. All righty. I will call your name. Please respond as yay or nay. Mark Stern.
Yay.
Courtney Greisel.
Yay.
Scott Lightcap.
Yay.
Joe Levisite.
Yay.
Chad Washington.
Yay.
All right, Chad, the motion carries. And we'll move forward with it for chair for another 2-year term. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for the vote of confidence. If there's anything that I can ever do to help facilitate these meetings better, or lead us in a different direction, I'm always open to that kind of feedback. So please reach out anytime.
And for the record, so that makes Chad our chair for another 2 years here, and Mark is our vice chair for another year for the remainder of his term here. So thank you both for the continuation and commitment to the committee. We really appreciate it also, and everyone here. Thank you for that reminder. Chad, do you mind if I go into then overview of the field trip real quick and wrap it up?
No, Mark, do you have your hand up?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
All right.
Go ahead.
And just to wrap up, the final thing, I'll meet with the chairs to discuss another meeting date, and we'll publicly announce that. But in the meantime, if the committee can send me track changes, we'll send out an email sometime soon to get that deadline, but probably not earlier than the next 2 weeks. Let's assume 2 to 3 weeks for that. Give you guys some time. All right, give me just a quick sec to flash this up here. Just want to make sure I engage you guys with our field trip.
Andy, as you're pulling that up, can you also explain how you're going to solicit the feedback on both the conservation easement and water rights acquisitions programs from the actual practitioners?
Members
We'll
of the
provide
public.
the red line versions, but what is the avenue that they're going to have to be able to communicate? And how are you going to share that back with us?
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate you doing that. So there was a press release announced 2 weeks ago encouraging members of the public to please continue on public comment. Public comment can be sent directly to the department. It can be sent to me, or you can go to pfagrants.com and find a bunch of information on it also under the advisory committee page. I encourage you to please submit comment ahead of committee meetings at least. We strive for 72 hours. The sooner before meeting, the more opportunity the committee gets to digest your comment. So comments are always accepted. We have public forum. You can do written testimony. You can do verbal. Every meeting in this committee has public comment added. So you're also welcome to ping me before and let me know you got public comment verbally coming up. Hope that answers the question. Mark?
Yeah, I guess I would just annotate that slightly to say I think we've had some demonstrated interest from the Pacific Forest Trust and from Colt, and I guess I would encourage you to reach out to them and see if you can set up a time to meet with them just to facilitate that interaction. Because I think, again, I think there's a lot of minutia in the land acquisition stuff that they could just help potentially clarify in different spots. So that would be my request of you.
Yeah, I think we would all be supportive of that. They have stuck on this call for a long time, and we need to make sure they know what their next steps are in order to influence the program.
All right, so I can take that back to the department as a committee directive, and we can engage a little bit more and see what that looks like in the future as we move forward with this program. It's an iterative process, so and we want to make sure this works for everyone. So I appreciate it. All right. Anything else on the public comment from the committee while I'm here? Great. All right.
Let's talk field trip, Andy.
All right, man, this has been a busy meeting. Appreciate the patience, everyone. I'll be quick. Coos Bay field trip. The committee's hosting a public field trip. Press release went out about 2 weeks ago, I believe. The public is welcome to join. It is recommended that you contact me if a member of the public wants to join this field trip. That's occurring this Thursday, October 2nd. We will be leaving pretty early from Coos Bay area. Any member of the public that does join is responsible for their own transportation and food throughout the entire day. An agenda is posted at pfagrants.com along with a map outlining each of the project tours that we are visiting, which are 3. So for the committee, real quick, I'm just gonna wrap this up and then any questions. I have confirmed reservations from all of you. Tiffany's out this week. Caleb Snyder, he'll be our partner in crime here in place of Tiffany and helping us out. So you might see some emails from Caleb or point of contact, super helpful. We will be meeting this Thursday, 8 a.m. in the lobby at the Mill Casino Hotel and RV Park in Coos Bay. I sent the committee this slide primarily. So you have this little circle, meet on the south side. This is, I believe, like the casino entrance. We're gonna be over on this side. You'll see what this looks like. Me and Caleb will be out front here with 2 vans for the committee. We'll be transporting, we'll be bringing food for you guys. We got that all figured out. Meet us there, 8 a.m. please. This sooner that I get everyone ready, I want it like wheels rolling by 8:30. I'm pretty strict when it comes to the time management, and we are going to have to be for this day. We are in for a long day. We will have some coffee in the lobby and some pastries also available when you guys come. Me and Caleb will most likely be in the lobby by 7:30 in the morning. So sooner you get there, the better, of course. I will be arriving with Caleb the day prior, Wednesday, which is tomorrow, around noon. So if there's anything that you guys need, I'm available. You have my phone number, shoot me a text, call me, whatever you need. I'll be here. I've confirmed all your reservations. We're all there. Should be under your name or ODFW as a block reservation. Lunch, snacks, and a restroom will be with us for the entirety of the trip. We'll have 2 vans and a few ODFW vehicles with us pulling a porta potty. We'll have snacks throughout the day and water available also, and water bottles and whatnot. It will be 2 vans, 2 7-person vans. Between the committee and who we're bringing, there should be still some elbow space in there. So you're not too squished. You guys have seen the agenda here. We're going to go to 3 project locations. I'm just talking, I'm not talking specifics about projects on this call unless you guys have any questions. I hope to be back at the hotel by 4:30. That's the goal. This is rain dependent, not rain dependent. We're going, but it's supposed to be a light rain. It's going to drizzle. Be prepared for that. One of the sites, just one, the first one, might get attack. We'll be on the side of a road, walking down onto a levee, so there might be some mud. Please bring some shoes that are appropriate for that. Not deep mud. It won't be bad. It's pretty compact. If we have to adjust, we'll stay up top and we'll look at it. So we have a course correction for that. The second location is mainly just looking at upstream. We'll be on a bridge, looking upstream, checking out what they did previously, and then looking downstream and visualizing the project. It's a different project type. Third project is, you don't have to worry really. It's all just walking on top of a tide gate, metal and everything right off the road. But please be prepared for the rain. It's Coos Bay. It says it's a sprinkle. One thing I've learned moving up from California is, can't always believe that.
A light rain in Coos Bay in October, Andy, I can't help myself but laugh a little bit. So just bring a raincoat and bring some shoes that are going to get muddy.
Yeah.
Bring a change of shoes. I will also say that lobby entrance right there that you have the picture of is right across from the hotel registration desk. So if you're at the hotel registration desk, that's the exit to walk out of. There's also a small breakfast restaurant if you want to grab a bite before the meetup right there by the registration desk in that part of the casino.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that cafe, I'll be there in that morning too with Caleb. So you'll be able to run into us also at that point. We will be out all day. So please bring what you need to bring. Dinner back, 6 p.m. So hopefully we wrap up back in the hotel by 4:30 or so. That's about 45 minutes at each site. I send you all your project packets. I'm going to print out extra for the field trip. But I would take some time to look through that, generate some questions. It's going to be quick. Grantees are going to be talking. So just get those questions ready ahead of time if you can, because it's 40 minutes at each site that we're talking. We're cranking through it. They're really excited to see all of you guys though. Dinner will be at 6. You'll be responsible for your own transportation there. Of course, we will have our vehicles and we can work with you guys if we need to. We have dinner 6 at Seven Devils on the Waterfront Ale House. We're the only ones have a reservation for about 15, so they should know who you are when you show up there. Just say ODFW. Other than that, I just want to mention real quick the staff that are going to be present, and I'll open up for questions and then stop talking so you guys can go home. So I have Mark Stern attending, Chad, Courtney, Scott, Joe, Jennifer from ODF will be attending, and Sarah Gregory from ODFW on this committee will also be attending. Other ODFW staff's going to be, of course, myself, Caleb in place of Tiffany for support staff. Sarah Reif will be present. our Habitat Division Administrator. You guys have seen her. AJ will be there, the PFA string biologist for the region. We will also have Ed Hughes, who is our fish habitat restoration biologist with us for the day, and Greg Hutchko, who's the Umpqua Watershed District Manager. We'll also have Megan, our I&E person there for the day to help publicize the event, take some good photos, and show the good work that the grantees are doing. Grantees are also going to be present. They're going to be doing most of the talking the whole time. I do assume some of them will bring their board members. Of course, everything's funding dependent for these grantees, so it just depends on availability and time. Some of those board members, like you guys, do other things. Wow, that's fast. That's it. Any questions from anyone for the trip? No business the first night. I'll be there. I'll be available. Reach out to me if you want to, no problem. Second day and night, it's a busy day. It's a busy night. Friday, no business.
Actually, I have a question, Andy. Is there do you know if there's EV chargers at the hotel there?
I will find out and get back to you on that one.
All right, thank you.
Yes, good question. I would assume, but all right, that's it. Please just get me those track changes in the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's what I would say. And then Chad, I'll hand it back to you here.
Great. We can close the meeting. Everybody travel safe down to Coos Bay, and looking forward to spending some time bouncing around in vans and looking at some really great projects. See you on Thursday.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.